Come closer. The fire's warm, but the story tonight is anything but. You've heard of Jack the Ripper. Everyone has. He stalked the alleyways of Whitechapel, left messages carved in flesh, and set all of London on edge. But in 1888, while the city's eyes were fixed on the East End, another body appeared. Or rather, part of one. A woman's torso, wrapped in cloth, hidden in a vault beneath the very building that would become Scotland Yard. There was no blood-soaked letter, no clever name from the press, no catchy calling card, just a body. Taken apart, erased, and quietly forgotten. She wasn't one of the Ripper's victims, but she may have been one of someone else's. And tonight, we tell her story. The woman with no name, the killer with no face, and the city that built its justice system on top of a cold case. This is From the Void, and this is the Whitehall Mystery. The first sign came on September 11th, 1888. A worker on the banks of the Thames noticed something odd wedged in the mud. It turned out to be a severed right arm and shoulder. A man named Frederick Moore, employed at Messrs. Ward's timber yard, had his attention drawn to a curious-looking object in the mud. He procured a ladder, descended, and was startled to find that it was a human arm. That arm was recovered and catalogued. But only a few weeks later, something far more macabre was found. This time, inside the site of New Scotland Yard itself. On October 2nd, 1888, in a subterranean vault section, part of the basement of the new police headquarters on Victoria Embankment, workers discovered a wrapped parcel. Inside was a headless, limbless torso, a female subject. The vault was only recently built, unlocked, and had been entered last on September 29th. Within days in mid-October, often cited as the 17th, a left leg, cut just above the knee, was unearthed and buried near the construction zone, a piece of the puzzle resurrected from the soil. So by mid-October, 3 fragments had appeared: an arm by the Thames, a torso in a police vault, and a buried leg. Identifying marks, and a clear thread tying them together. The inquest was opened by Coroner John Troutbeck in Westminster. The medical evidence would come from Dr. Thomas Bond, among others. Taken from Bond's own casebook inquest notes, he determined the following: cleanly cut, now sawn. The joints disarticulated. This was not random brutality, but precise, informed work. Bond had estimated the victim to be a woman in her mid-20s, of large and well-nourished frame, about 5 feet 8 inches tall. He judged the dismemberment was done post-mortem, likely in stages, and likely by someone with at least some understanding of joints, ligaments, and human form. Because fragments were found in water and buried in soil, decomposition estimates varied. Bond believed the cold water slowed decay. Some parts may have awaited reassembly elsewhere before final disposal. No clothing tags, no jewelry, no identifying marks were recovered. The torso was wrapped in cloth, possibly from a black petticoat, and tied with string. No known attempt was made to conceal the wrapping, suggesting either confidence or haste. By early October 1888, London was a city on edge. The Ripper was still out there. The press was ravenous, and the Metropolitan Police were overwhelmed. Then came the body in the vault, a mutilated torso found just a stone's throw from Parliament. The question came quickly: could this be another Ripper killing? The similarities were enough to raise eyebrows. A young woman, brutally cut, and the killer seemed to know the body, where to separate flesh from joint, how to avoid the bone. It echoed what some coroners had already suspected about the Ripper, that he wasn't just a madman, that he had anatomical knowledge, maybe even medical training. 2 murders, both targeting women, both cutting with precision. Was this a new killer or the same one changing tactics? But police quickly noticed differences. There was no frenzied stabbing, no overt sexual mutilation, no theatrical display on the streets of Whitechapel. This wasn't a message. It was a body disposed of like evidence. This killer disposed of the body. Jack the Ripper put it on display, daring the police to catch him if they could. Scotland Yard detectives began methodically trying to identify the victim. They compared the remains to missing persons reports across London. They circulated descriptions of the torso and arm to nearby districts. Some inquiries extended as far as the Midlands. They examined every scar, mole, and physical trait for a match. But there were few to go on. No jewelry, no birthmarks, and no head for dental comparison. Even the clothing fragment, a strip of black petticoat, offered no brand tag, no maker's mark. Investigators even reached out to local hospitals and dissection facilities, asking whether any anatomical specimens had gone missing or been stolen. It wasn't the first time in Victorian London that dismembered bodies turned up near medical schools. But no reports matched. From a forensic perspective, there was still no head found for comparison. No jewelry, no distinctive clothing to trace. And the forensic science that might have broken the case wide open just didn't exist yet. There was no fingerprinting system. That wouldn't be adopted by Scotland Yard until 1901. No blood typing. It wouldn't be discovered until 1900. DNA analysis? That was nearly a century away. Even crime scene photography was rare and inconsistent. If any photos were taken, none have survived. What investigators did have was basic physical description. Approximate height, weight, build. They relied on scars, moles, and deformities. They circulated hand-drawn sketches and sent word to hospitals, mortuaries, and medical schools, asking if any cadavers had gone missing. But there were no matches. No one claimed her. No one recognized her. The coroner could describe her body in detail, but not her name. Imagine trying to solve a murder where the body is incomplete. The killer left no signature, and the science you need hasn't even been invented yet. So if this wasn't the Ripper, then who or what were police dealing with? One of the earliest theories focused on anatomy. They say the body had been dismembered, not hacked in rage, but taken apart joint by joint, suggesting that the killer might have had anatomical knowledge. That didn't necessarily mean a doctor. In Victorian London, knowledge of the human body wasn't limited to hospitals. Butchers, slaughterhouse workers, even grave robbers might have known where to cut. But if the killer did have medical experience, what kind of person with that kind of training would choose to use it in that way? Another theory was more practical and more disturbing. Perhaps the woman had died during an illegal abortion, and someone with enough skill to dismember her was trying to cover it up. There were known abortionists in London operating in the shadows. Some of them had medical ties. If this was a procedure gone wrong, the disposal might have been coldly calculated, not sadistic. But if the killer did have that kind of skill, why take the time? Why go through the trouble of wrapping and relocating? Why not just hide the body? One theory, maybe dismemberment wasn't just to hide the crime. It was to hide the victim. No head, no face, no name. Just a puzzle of flesh left in the shadows. And here's where things get even darker. This wasn't the only case of this kind. Between 1873 and 1889, at least 4 other dismembered female bodies were discovered across London and along the Thames. There was the Rainham mystery in 1873, remains of an unknown woman scattered along the Thames estuary. The Pinchin Street torso in 1889, just a few blocks from Whitechapel. The case of Elizabeth Jackson, also in 1889, her body parts wrapped and placed in the river, much like the woman beneath Scotland Yard. These weren't Ripper killings. There was no frenzied mutilation, no knives left behind, no dramatic scene for the press to gawk at. Instead, they shared a quieter, more methodical pattern. In every case, the victim was a woman. The body was dismembered with anatomical precision. The head was missing. The remains were wrapped, often in cloth or paper. The disposal sites hugged the river. No one ever witnessed the drop-offs. And the killings all happened elsewhere. The Thames was just the dump site. That's not coincidence. That's methodology. It suggests routine, familiarity, control. Some criminologists now believe these weren't isolated murders, that a second killer, or killers, was at work in London, targeting women in a calculated way. While the Ripper carved fear into the streets, someone else was quietly making people disappear. I want to pause for a second and go back to one of the other victims we just covered. One of the few victims ever actually identified. Elizabeth Jackson, a 24-year-old from Chelsea. She'd worked as a domestic servant, fallen on hard times, spent time in and out of infirmaries and workhouses. By the spring of 1889, she had no fixed address. Drifting, vulnerable, and forgotten. She also carried a scar. A cesarean section left from a difficult birth. That scar would be the only thing that spoke for her. Between May 31st and June 25th, her body began appearing in pieces, wrapped in cloth or paper, drifting along the Thames. The cuts were precise. The head was missing, just like the others. Her brother came forward after reading about the case. He recognized the details. Doctors confirmed the surgical history, and for once, there was a name. Elizabeth Jackson didn't just confirm the killer's MO. She painted a portrait of the kind of women being targeted. The poor, the unhoused, the mentally ill. The ones no one reported missing, until it was too late. If Elizabeth hadn't had that scar, or a brother willing to come forward, would we even know she existed? Her story reminds us what these killings were really about. Not just the destruction of a body, but the erasure of identity. And the woman buried beneath Scotland Yard may have lived and died the same way. Every unsolved murder leaves questions, but the Whitehall mystery leaves silence. No one ever came forward to claim her. No missing person report ever matched. No head was ever found. No fingerprints were taken. They didn't yet exist. No photos of the scene have survived, if they were taken at all. There were no police sketches, no autopsy drawings, no preserved evidence, no labeled burial, no case file in the public record. She was cataloged, examined, buried, and forgotten. How do you tell the story of someone who was systematically erased, first by their killer, then by time? in a city that recorded everything. Census lists, workhouse logs, coroners' inquests, even street lamp repairs. This woman left no trace. Or if she did, the world never connected the dots. We don't know where she lived, what she did, what she feared, who she trusted, or what she might have said if someone had been there to listen. And that's what makes this mystery so haunting. The Ripper's victims became symbols of violence, of fear, of the failure of the system to protect the most vulnerable. But the woman in the vault beneath Scotland Yard, she didn't even get that. No outrage, no justice, just silence. So here we are again, sitting by the fire, sorting through old bones and colder questions. A woman lies in a grave with no name. A killer vanished into the fog. And the heart of an empire was built, quite literally, on top of her body. There's something poetic about that, and something horrifying too. She wasn't a prostitute, or if she was, no one ever said so. She wasn't posed like the Ripper's victims. She wasn't found in an alley. Her death wasn't theatrical. It was clinical and erasing. That's the legacy of the Whitehall mystery. Not a trail of gore, but a vacuum. A woman cut apart, cataloged by parts, remembered by none. Except now. Because someone had to tell her story. Someone had to open the file, dust off the reports, pull her out from under the foundations. Maybe she was like Elizabeth Jackson, a girl from nowhere with a scar that couldn't be ignored. Maybe she was someone's sister, someone's daughter, someone that somebody loved once. Or maybe she was always alone, just a ghost in a city that already had too many. There's no monument for the woman in the vault, no plaque in Whitehall, no exhibit in the Crime Museum. But tonight, she gets something else. A name carved in sound. A place by the fire. A memory pulled from the void.